Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today we're Masechtas Nedarim Daf Ayin Gimel. We are going to begin on Ayin Gimel Amud Aleph, 3 lines from the top. So we were in the middle of discussing, in the event that the husband wishes to be made for a neder, the question is, does he actually need to know and have heard the neder because the pasuk says V'shama Isha, or is he allowed to make a hafara in general regarding the Nedarim that she may have made, even though he never heard it? So we tried to give different tirutzim, and now, as almost an imtim salaymer, assuming that he could do so, we ask the next question. Boy Rami Barchama, Cherish Mahu Shiafel Ishto. What's the din? Do we say that a husband who is a cherish, unless the Ran says he's a cherish, he's medaber, he can speak, so he has the physical capability of being mefer, which you need to be able to speak, but he can't hear. He's an enu shemea. What's the din? Is he allowed to be mefer the nedarim? Now, v'imtim solayim rebal mefer b'lo shmiya. Maybe we do hold that if the husband, another husband who can hear, he's allowed to be made for a neder, even though he didn't actually hear it, mishum debar shmiyahu, because he's someone that is able to hear. Of a cherish la bar shmiyahu. However, someone who is a cherish, obviously he physically is incapable of ever hearing. So maybe it's not necessary to hear it, but at least that you have the ability to hear it. That's why you can be mefer. So why would we make that distinction? As we see this in so many places in this name of Shas over and over. Didn't the Chiddush of Rab Zera by Menachos, Hainu Rab Zera, the Rab Zera, Kol Haroi Labila in Bila Makeves Bo, B'chol Shein Roi Labila Bila Makeves Bo. So when it comes to, and let's just look at this Rashi, V'kimu Rabban B'samech Nivlom B'kli Echad, Yerse in Nivlolim. So up until 60, so one can mix that flour in one kli, but if it's 61, not. So the din is also imlo bol kosher, that if you would not actually mix the menachos, it's still kosher. It's not required. However, it has to be royal labila. It has to at least be fit. Namely, even though you don't mix it, but at least has to be not so much flour that if you wish to, you could. But if you would have 61 measures in one kli, that's not shaykh, and therefore that would be an issue. So too, explains Rashi, a cherish, even though it's true, a regular person, if he didn't hear it, maybe he could be mefer, but in this situation, it's impossible. He's not even fit to be able to do so. Maybe he's not able to be mefer. So that is the question. So in this, the Gemara says as follows. Omer Rava Tashma. The pasuk says, V'shama Isha, that the husband hears it. So why are we saying Isha? So it must be coming to exclude someone. So it's prat le'eshas cherish mamina. It's coming to exclude the wife of a cherish is not able to be made for his wife's nedarim. He's not allowed. He's not able to. So that's the answer, that it's not allowed. But even more importantly, the Ran explains this answers another question. If we look at the third wide line, the ilo tema hachil el amailo pashtua lahi boy mahach brisa. Ella vadi mishum deikla dechui kedechaninon. You always could have answered as we said before. Miu afil hachik ivadi kamarachama imtim salaymer. The whole idea when Gemara uses an imtim salaymer, it's based on the premise that it's based on something that was said before. The first question, Bal mefer b'lo shmiya. It teaches us that a husband can be mefer even though he didn't hear it. Umas mechli nami Rab Zera. And you could be semach on Rav Zera, Diamer Kol Haroy Labila in Bil Makevesbo. Mash B'Dahachin Kaimelon. Must be that's how we hold. It's not necessary to hear it. You just have to be fit to be able to have been able to have heard it. So therefore, question 6. Ma naktinan lahalacha b'hadi boya ibal mefer b'shmiya. So we paskin, based on what we just saw, that a husband is able to be made for a neder even if he didn't hear it, excluding a cherish who delab bar shmehu. He's not shaykh to be able to speak, to be able to hear it. Iboilu Baal, separate question. Mahu shiyafur l'shtein nashav bavas achas. So on this, the Ran explains, what exactly is this case? Shim nadru shtein, let's say he has two women that made this a neder, and he just says, I'm annulling both of your vows. So he does it at the same time. He only does one hafara. Does it work? Can you do one hafara? Or do you have to do separate hafaras for each one? Why would you think? Because osa dafka olav dafka. The fact that it says osa is the word osa dafka, specifically one at a time, or you could even do shtam b'basachas. So Ravina Tashma ein mashkin shtei saitais kachas. We don't allow you to give the mesaita to two different women at the same time. Now, we try to deter a woman from drinking the mesota by having her admit to her guilt, and then she wouldn't end up drinking mesota. So it says, the concern is that if she sees friend A drinking mesota, she, even though she's guilty, may say, oh, it's no big deal. She did it and I'll do it. Misery, it takes company. So therefore, because of that by you seeing someone else do something wrong, or it may not be wrong, in this case, drinking the mesota, but it makes you more comfortable to do it. When someone does something first, it is hard to do. But once you see someone else already did it, so it's much easier for you to do the same thing. And she may be guilty, and we would rather her admit to her guilt. So therefore, we don't want it to be done all in one time. That's one answer. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, woman Hashemus, that's not because of that. Osa levada. So since we see the word osa teaches us that it must be done. Whenever you see the word osa, it must be telling you that it must be done only one at a time. So that's by the din of sota. And therefore, question 7, that also will apply to the din of hafara. Let's look at the Ran if it applies to other things as well. Woman Hashem says, so Osol Lavada, Le'inin Halacha, Ika Madi Armid Ravina, Midrabanan Moichachla, Laba'ain de Lo Mashmahu Oisa Davka. Okay? And then you skip down to the Ramban, it says, Matam Osol Lavada, why Osa only by herself, and Meshali Begas Bachaverta. Amal Kuliyam Madarshin Osol Lavada. It's clear, it's not that it's a machlokus, because do you learn that Osa? So maybe that's the reason why he says that liba gaspa b'chaverta is because he doesn't hold of the drasha of osa, is telling you oisa zlavada? Maybe not. So it says in Masechtas Yoma, nami arin the osa davkin arin in hasam in shaychdin shtei paras kachas, that when it comes to the din of a paraduma, we don't shech the paraduma. If we have two paradumas, which not so easy to come by, we don't shech them both. Mishim shnemer osa v'lo osa v'yes chaverta. So we see also when it comes to the din of the paraduma, we also say the shechita has to be done separately. And second last line, probably the same thing. That just as you can't do hafara, so too you also cannot do hakama for two women at the same time. So question 7 tells us 4 times that based on osa, that you can't do 2 in 1. Hafara, hakama, hashkasaita, and shchitas paraduma. Okay. Let's say TB19, maybe it's the same question. Ein mashkin beisaitas kachas ne shaliba gaspa, Rabbi Yehuda oimer b'chul. Ma loben mekan ravina le'inyan hafara lebeis nashav kachas. So I wrote, you can't do hafara or hakama to 2 women b'vasachas. I think that's probably just the answer. Pretty straightforward. Long answer over here. Ikaman diamerd. Does he bring down the Ran? Oh, he asked for the Ran. That's why. Ikaman diamerd the midrabanan hoichiach deloi mashmahu dikra kapadoi silavadol. If he kach ben Nedarim deleka taima deliba gaspa. So it's interesting. The Ran says, no, well, maybe the whole time is dafka because of liba gaspa. But if you don't have that issue by Nedarim, so maybe it is allowed to be done. L'fikach Nedarim nami name osa lavad davin mefer lebeiz noshav ka'achas. So what I thought was a clean, simple question was not a simple question, because the Ran actually, as we saw, brings down that maybe you could make this diak. Oh, maybe the answer, it's coming to tell you that dafka when it comes to hashkas saita, because there's the issue that she may end up drinking the mesaita because her friend did it, but there's no reason to think that when it comes to a neder, so you can do a hafara together b'vasachas. So there's actually two ways to look at it. That this is because it doesn't say Shema Minod afterwards. Very interesting. The Gemara doesn't tell us what the raya is. It just brings us as a raya. So the Pashib Shad, I think, is the second answer, which I think is the Ramban. Basically, it's coming to tell you that it's telling you that you can, just like whenever it says the word Osa, it's Dafka. Or no, Osa is not Dafka. It means Osa is lav dafka, but you also have to have the reason of leave a gospel. If you don't have leave a gospel, like by hafara, so then it doesn't apply. You could do bavasachas, which is an unbelievably beautiful pshat. You can understand why you probably only got to have credit for that question. It's a very hard question. Reading a lot of these questions, these test questions, you would learn them, and you're not sure if the person who's asking the question is just asking pashut pshat, or maybe it's coming up to a couple of different answers. So the way that it's framed over here, again, it doesn't say, it actually says Beis Pirushim Baran. So that was my mistake. It says explicitly in the question that there's two Pirushim to this. And the fact is, I just read it Pashut Pshat without seeing that part of the question. And therefore, that's why it was not completely correct. Okay, let's continue now with Ayin Gimel Mid Beis. We're now up to a new Mishnah, Masnisin. Boigeres. Now, even though it's not written this way in the Mishnah, but the Rashi helps us out over here and says it's two cases. Habogeres ve'hanayir sheshasi beis chodesh. These are two separate cases. Either a girl who's already 12 and a half, or a woman who has already been waiting for 12 months since Kedushin, va'almana, as well as a widow, Lamed Yoim. So it's either 12 months for her to get Mizonos or 30 days if it's an Almana. So this is a great Chiddush, that even though this is they're only at the Kedushin level, the Baal is made for himself, like she's fully married since he's Chayv Mizonos. So the father no longer, as we saw in the beginning of this paragraph, the father, when it comes to the Eris and Kedushin stage, the father also does. But that's only up until the Chiyah Mizonos. Once there's a Chiyah Mizonos, now all of a sudden the husband takes upon all rights exclusively of the Hafara. The Chachamim say that the husband is not allowed to be Mefer, and the Rashi says Yechidi ad shetichanes l'reshusai. It's not true. According to the Chachamim, they disagree, and they say that it still applies. That, and if you look in the Ran, Chachamim Hani Rabbi Yeshua, who bar plukta to Rabbi Eliezer b'chol duchta. Whenever you have Rabbi Eliezer, you always have Rabbi Yehoshua nearby. So he's arguing, he's the bar plukta. Why does it say v'chachamim oimrim? Okay, but that's the shita. Okay, until the end, which the Ran says, until chuppah. Gemara. So Omer Rabba, Rabbi Eliezer, which again says, which is the Reish of the Mishnah, saying that the man gets full rights of being mefer his wife's Nedarim b'shas kedushin without the father after his chayv mizonos, or Mishnah Rishayna, as well as the first Mishnah, which we'll see what that is. Amar Rabbi Achad. What is that? None. We give, when it comes to marrying a basula, this man has 12 months, lefarnes atzma, to prepare herself for the wedding. So they have this amount of time. Hagiyud beis chodesh, this is brought down in Masechtas Ksubas, the very beginning. As soon as the 12 months go by, she's allowed to eat food. In other words, you're mechuyet to give her mazonos, even though you haven't done the suin yet. It's enough time already. You can do it. You should have married already, so therefore you're mechuyet mazonos. And if you're a kohen, she gets to eat truma. Why? Don't you have to wait until chuppah? So midaraisa not, as the Ran reminds us, is said in many places in Kedushin and elsewhere, the kinyan kasbo imrachmana v'hai kinyan da'achiv. So, okay, so we'll see what that means. But there is when it comes to Kedushin, it's the kinyan kasbo, because you gave her kesef shtarabiyah, you're mekadosh her with Kedushin money. So now, even though she's a Bas Yisrael, her father's Yisrael, but since you're a Kohen, the husband's a Kohen, she eats Truma. But if she's a Yavam, she does not eat Truma, and that's where the Ran I said, because it has to only be a Kinyan Kaspo. But if the reason why is because there's a Zika, because of her connection to the brother, because her husband died, they died childless, so she doesn't eat Truma until actually they're married, which is Bia. Let's say 6 months she was by her husband. So it wasn't a full year. If she was totally by her husband, or she was totally by the yavam, so in all these different cases, she still now doesn't eat truma. So zu Mishnah Rishayna. This is the Mishnah Rishayna. That again we see, which is like our Mishnah, that there's this din of Yud Beis Chodesh, that she should be able to eat truma. She's not to eat truma, or she's chayv mazonos. Since she's chayv mazonos, so that should also mean that she should be able to. He can be made for her Nedarim. Now, based in Shal Achareihem Amru, a later court said, "Ein isha chelas b'truma she'tahanas l'chuppah." No, she's not allowed to eat truma b'shas kedushin, even though you have this pasuk midaraisa, she can. She's not allowed to eat truma. So Emily Abaya Dilma Lohi. You can't learn out a connection of being able to eat truma, being chayv and mazonos, and this guy being made for her, all is the same thing. Because Dilma Lohi Ad kan lohi kashmina mishri shayna ela mecha b'truma d'Rabbanan. Maybe when it says that after there's a chimazonos, that she's allowed to eat truma, is maybe we're only talking about a case of truma d'Rabbanan. Of Nedarim d'Oraisa malo. Maybe this husband doesn't have a right to be made for her at this time. Let's look in the Ran. Ein isha achelas b'truma shekans l'chuppah. Imefarshi hasam tamayu imishum simpon imishum shema tashke kaishel trum lachav achaisai. So it's brought down over there that there's a couple of basic reasons why the Mishnah Acharayna says she has to wait till chuppah, which also means bia, because of simpon, maybe she has a mum, some blemish that he'd be makbid on. So once they're married and they had relations and they've shared intimacy, so then only afterwards you'll know it was not a mekachtos. Or if we allow her to start eating truma and she's still living by her father, who's a Yisrael, so all these other people, she may eat truma, but no one else. So that's why the Mishnah Acharayna said no. So let's continue the Ran. The Kosach Adaita Chashta Ilav the Mishnah Rishayna Svirli Kerbelezer. If it wasn't for the first Mishnah, Avagav the Isser Truma Be'arusa Leisa the Rabbanan the Gazer. There was only a din the Rabbanan Afil Hachi Ilav the Midi the Raisa Kaimer Rishas Bala Kerbelezer with Truma Nami. Avagav the Rabbanan he Ukma Bereshuse the Chachamim Asu Chizik L'Devrehim Kashel Taira. So even though Truma's D'Rabbanan, we would maybe say also Chizik L'Shel Taira. So because Truma, which is a Din D'Rabbanan, we allow, so too when it comes to Hafara. Okay, so you said maybe that's not the case. Leicha Mecha Shlahachi V'Shari D'Mishum Simpon Leika. We're not concerned as simpon of a mum. As it's brought down and over in Ksubas, that you have a relative, right? She's going to go to the mikvah, you're going to ask your relatives to check her out. So a person doesn't end up just throwing his money into nothing. He's not going to give money into this relationship until he knows for sure that this is a woman that he wants. Ubedikas chutz shema bedika. And the outer bedika's work, so mishim shematashka nami leika givan deihu mifarnes la duchta miyachid la. Since he's giving her mizonos, he's miyachid already with her. So basically, she may not necessarily even be with the her siblings. Of Nedarim dimidaraisa ein aros mefer. Maybe when it comes to Nedarim, no. Afil achar sheneschai b'mizonoseha. Even after you have to give her mizonos, emelach the lo matzi mefer b'lo shut fasei da'av, unless the father is also present. He also has to participate in the hafar. Back in the Gemara. Yad kan lo shama shamat Rabbi Lezer el gam Nedarim. Maybe the only time Rabbi Lezer says that there's this din that the husband has certain rights is only by Nedarim. Because when she makes the neder, she's doing it with the mindset of her husband, and therefore you should have rights when it comes to being made for that neder. Maybe we're strict when it comes to truma, even when it comes to a din d'Rabbanan of these concerns. So if we look in the Ran, he says, "B'katana shehisua ima v'yacheha." So let's say you have a katana in which it's kedushi maimer. It's not a kedushi deraisa because the father, let's say, is dead. So the mother and her brother can marry her off. So the bala mefer nidareha. The husband can be made for these nidarim. The afalav din nadra chayil midaraisa. Even though the nether is chayil midaraisa, the kaimelon de mufla samach ish midaraisa. That a year before her bat mitzvah, it's a valid neder. Kanisa hasam and the sui katana leis no rabbanan, and the whole marriage is no rabbanan. Fil hachi asin the sui rabbanan mavati nedarim deraisa k'ra pinchas. Nonetheless, we could say that this marriage, which is the rabbanan, because it was from the parent, it wasn't from the father, it wasn't as beating the stati shazed, the father's not there. It can be mavatal neder deraisa because of Rab Pinchas, because she was only not noderis al das balwa. Miu, says the Ran, Michivan, Shenechnas ol chuppah, feel b'chuppah d'Rabbanan, like a katana, Moide Rabbanan shall daito hino deres, Mishum hachi, asin esun d'Rabbanan mavatan nidra d'raisa uksivino. Okay. So let's look at question 8. We're going to stop there. Ma svara, loimer, what's the logic to say that when she reaches the age, 12 months go by, and the Mishnah Rishayna says you could eat truma, but maybe you cannot be made for Nedarim. So why? So maybe you could eat truma because midaraisa she's allowed to eat because of kinyan kaspa. So, and maybe we're not chayish, as we said, of simpon or teichel, mashkin kun Nedarim, which is the din deraisa. So in that case, the husband cannot be made for himself. Or you can say the other way around. Maybe the husband can be made for Nedarim because kol noderis al das bail noderis. She did it with his, with him in mind. About truma lu'achla. But maybe we are chayish based on these different issues as was stated. Okay. Let's see if there's another question here. Question TA 18. Ma stadim de boy im bal yachal hafer l'shtei nashim avasachas. So, he'im o sadavka o labdavka ad kan.